I watched a master martial artist fail yesterday, not against a superior opponent, against himself. His body moved perfectly, his mind calculated flawlessly. Yet between these two excellences lay a gap, invisible but fatal. This gap exists in nearly everyone I've encountered, from Hong Kong street fighters to Hollywood stuntmen. Most call this training, developing the body in one room, the mind in another, then hoping these strangers somehow cooperate when needed. This approach is fundamentally broken. During intense combat at Golden Harvest Studios in 1972, I experienced something that contradicted everything I'd been taught. My body responded before conscious thought, yet with perfect precision. Not because thought was absent, but because thought and movement had become unified through a specific integration practice I'd been developing. Western approaches fragment human capacity. Mind commands, body obeys. Eastern traditions acknowledge unity, but rarely provide systematic methods to develop it. Neither approach alone creates the breakthrough I'm about to share with you. What you'll learn isn't meditation. It isn't physical training. It's a precise methodology I developed through hundreds of hours of experimentation at my Kowloon training studio, often working through the night while others slept. I call it concentric integration, not because it sounds impressive, but because it accurately describes the process of working from outer physical layers inward toward core awareness, then back outward as expression. Here's what most fail to recognize. The boundary between physical and mental exists only in our perception, not reality. This artificial division creates what I call response lag, the microseconds of translation between thought and action that mean the difference between mastery and mediocrity. The complete practice unfolds through 5 sequential phases that systematically eliminate this division. Most practitioners work for decades without addressing the fundamental problem. They simply become more efficient at living a divided existence. The method requires only 15 minutes, yet don't mistake brevity for simplicity. Each phase penetrates deeper. We begin with structural alignment, not static posture, but dynamic foundation. Then breathing coordination, linking rhythm to intention. The third phase, energetic perception, develops awareness of what exists between obvious categories. Fourth, intention projection, directing will through structure. Finally, integrated expression, unifying all elements in movement. What makes this approach unlike others? It targets precisely where integration fails. Not in your body, not in your mind, but in the perceived boundary between them. Most never address this boundary directly. They simply try to build stronger components on either side. Ready yourself. This isn't comfortable practice. It will challenge your most basic assumptions about how you exist in your body. Begin standing with feet shoulder width apart, knees slightly bent. Most assume this is merely a stance. It is not. It is the foundation of integration. The position itself matters less than the quality of awareness you bring to it. What I discovered in my Oakland studio in 1969 shocked me. I had been practicing perfect form for years, yet only when I began investigating the relationship between structural precision and mental state did I understand what was missing. Place your feet firmly, not rigid, but rooted. Feel 3 points of contact with the ground. The ball behind your big toe, the ball behind your little toe, and your heel. This triangular foundation creates what I call alive stability, rooted yet responsive. Most fighters either root too deeply and become immobile, or remain too light and lose power. Now stack your structure. Ankles beneath knees, knees beneath hips, hips beneath shoulders, shoulders beneath head. This is not static alignment. It is dynamic, requiring continuous micro-adjustments. When filming Enter the Dragon, I would maintain this alignment for hours between takes, discovering that structural integrity directly influences mental clarity. The cameramen thought I was simply standing still. I was developing integration. The key insight that transformed my practice was this: physical alignment is not separate from mental alignment. When the spine compresses, thinking becomes clouded. When posture collapses, awareness diminishes. This isn't metaphorical. It's neurological reality I confirmed through thousands of hours of precise observation. Cycle your attention through each structural point systematically. First, feet connecting to ground. Feel the energy exchange happening there. Then knees, not locked but energetically extended. Hips, level yet relaxed. Spine, lengthened without tension. Shoulders, neither raised nor depressed but finding their natural position. Neck, elongated, as if suspended. Head, balanced effortlessly, like a ball floating on water. With each breath, refine one aspect of alignment. I discovered during intensive training before filming Game of Death that this cycling of attention creates a feedback loop between structural precision and mental clarity. When my structure was precisely aligned, my perception expanded dramatically. When my perception was clear, my structural awareness became more refined. You may notice something peculiar as you practice this. The division between what you consider physical and what you consider mental begins to blur. This is not coincidental. It is the first stage of integration. You're discovering that the categorization itself is arbitrary. Most martial artists I encountered in competitions maintained either excellent structure without awareness or awareness without structure. Neither approach creates the foundation for what follows. What separates mastery from mere technical proficiency is this precise relationship between form and consciousness. Now, without abandoning this structural awareness, we'll add the second dimension of integration, the breath that connects structure to energy. While maintaining the structural alignment we've established, now shift your attention to the breath. This is where most training systems fail. They treat breathing as a separate function rather than the bridge between structure and energy. I discovered what I call three-dimensional breathing during an intensive training period in 1971. I had injured my back on the set of The Big Boss and was forced to reconsider everything about my movement. Lying immobile in my hotel room, I began experimenting with breath control that engaged the entire torso, not just the lungs. As you inhale, experience expansion in three distinct vectors simultaneously. Vertical, your spine lengthening from coccyx to crown. Horizontal, your rib cage widening from center to sides. And internal, your abdomen expanding from navel to spine. This creates what I call spherical expansion, growth in all directions from your center. You'll feel a sensation like your entire torso becoming a three-dimensional balloon, expanding outward from your dantian, the energy center located about 3 finger widths below your navel. This point served as my physical and energetic anchor during my most demanding fight scenes. When the center expands properly, power can be generated without tension. On exhalation, experience controlled contraction along these same 3 dimensions, but never collapse the structure we established in phase 1. Notice how this differs from normal breathing. Most people breathe partially, using either chest or abdomen, but rarely the complete torso as an integrated system. Notice how different mental states affect your breathing pattern. When anxious, breath becomes shallow and rapid, concentrated in the upper chest. When deeply focused, breath naturally deepens and slows. I observed this connection during intense sparring sessions. The moment an opponent's breathing pattern changed, I could predict their next movement. Their breath telegraphed their intention before their body moved. What makes this phase transformative is the direct connection you establish between breath quality and mental state. This isn't mystical nonsense. It's physiological fact. During filming of Way of the Dragon, I would modulate my breathing pattern before each take to create the precise emotional and energetic state required for the scene. My co-stars thought I was simply preparing emotionally. I was actually recalibrating my entire system through breath control. Start with obvious breathing movements, then progressively refine until you're working with subtle expansions and contractions that would be invisible to an observer. Can you feel how smaller, more controlled breathing creates greater mental precision? Can you sense how expansive breathing creates a different quality of awareness? Here's a critical distinction I discovered through countless hours of practice. Most martial artists breathe to fuel movement. This creates a segmented experience. Breath supports action, but remains separate from it. In integration practice, breath becomes action, and action becomes breath. They are no longer sequential, but simultaneous. I developed this breathing coordination initially to increase power in my 1-inch punch. What I found instead was something far more valuable, a method to eliminate the gap between intention and action. When breath, structure, and intention align, response time drops to 0. This isn't reaction. It's instantaneous expression without the normal processing delay. While maintaining both structural alignment and breathing coordination, we'll now add the third dimension, developing awareness of what exists between the obvious categories of perception. Now we approach what most consider mystical, the perception of energetic currents. Let me be clear, there is nothing supernatural about this phase. What I call energetic currents are simply sensations that exist at the interface between obvious physical feelings and mental awareness. Sensations most overlook because they don't fit neatly into either category. I first encountered these sensations during intensive training in 1970. After 6 hours of continuous practice, when physical exhaustion should have diminished awareness, I experienced instead a heightened perception of subtle internal movements, currents of sensation flowing through my body that weren't quite physical and weren't quite mental. While maintaining structural alignment and breathing coordination, direct your attention to sensing these currents. Initially, they typically manifest as warmth or subtle tingling, particularly in the hands, feet, and along the center line of the body. The palms and soles often activate first. You may feel a gentle pulsing or buzzing sensation there, as if the skin itself were breathing. For me, these sensations first appeared as warmth spiraling up from my dantian through my spine, then radiating outward through my limbs. During filming fight sequences, I would activate this awareness before cameras rolled, not as ritual, but as practical preparation for heightened perception. The critical distinction in this phase is maintaining precise awareness without creating tension or expectation. Most practitioners make one of two errors. Either they try too hard, creating tension that blocks perception, or they remain too passive, failing to direct attention with sufficient precision. Systematically scan your body, starting with your hands. Can you feel the subtle pulsation in your palms? This isn't imagination, it's perception of actual bioelectrical activity normally filtered from awareness. Move your attention to your feet, sensing the same quality there. Then trace the center line of your body from perineum to crown, following the pathways I modified from traditional Qi Kung practice. Don't be concerned if perceptions seem vague at first. Most people have never been trained to notice these sensations. It's like developing the ability to taste subtle flavors. It requires practice, but becomes increasingly precise with time. During my development of Jeet Kune Do, I spent hundreds of hours refining this perceptual ability, discovering that combat effectiveness increased dramatically as perceptual sensitivity improved. What makes this phase transformative is that you're developing awareness of what typically falls between conscious categories. Western training approaches recognize either obvious physical sensations or mental emotional states, missing entirely the subtle territory between them where integration actually occurs. I discovered this interface was the key to developing what some called my supernatural speed. There was nothing supernatural about it. I had simply trained myself to perceive and respond at a level most leave undeveloped. During my demonstrations at international tournaments, observers would attribute my speed to physical conditioning. The truth was much more interesting. I had developed perception and response at the energetic level, eliminating the normal processing delay. As you become more sensitive to these energetic currents, you'll notice they respond instantly to intention, changing direction, intensity, and quality based on your mental focus. This relationship between intention and energy flow is the foundation for the fourth phase of our practice. While maintaining awareness of structural alignment, breathing coordination, and these energetic currents, we'll now add the deliberate projection of intention through this integrated system. Now we move from perception to action, from awareness to expression. This fourth phase represents the pivotal transition I discovered in 1971 during isolated training sessions at my home in Kowloon. I had reached the limits of conventional speed training when I stumbled upon something remarkable. Intention, when properly aligned with structure, breath, and energy, creates measurable physical effects before obvious movement begins. While maintaining structural alignment, breathing coordination, and energetic awareness, add the deliberate projection of intention through this integrated system. Begin by visualizing a specific directional intention. For simplicity, imagine projecting energy forward through your extended hand. Don't move physically. Instead, create the internal experience of forward projection while remaining externally still. Most practitioners make a fundamental error here. They assume intention is merely mental rehearsal for physical action. It's not. Intention is itself a form of action that creates subtle but measurable changes in your system. During my research for Game of Death, I conducted experiments with medical equipment that confirmed what I had experienced subjectively. Clear intention creates micro adjustments in muscular tone, fascial tension, and bioelectrical activity before any visible movement occurs. When I prepared to break boards without touching them, allowing only a 1-inch striking distance, these pre-movement patterns determined success or failure. You'll begin to notice that as you project intention forward, your body automatically creates what I call structural preloading, subtle shifts in alignment that prepare for expression. This isn't conscious preparation. It's your integrated system responding directly to intention. The breakthrough that transformed my fighting approach came during a private demonstration in 1972. I had been challenged to demonstrate power without telegraphing movement. In that moment, I discovered I could project intention so clearly that opponents would react to it before I moved, creating openings without physical action. What appeared to be mind reading was actually heightened sensitivity to these pre-movement signals. Try projecting different qualities of intention, not just directional force, but expansion, contraction, stability, or fluid mobility. Notice how each creates a distinct pattern of response in your integrated system. During my final film work, I could switch between these qualities instantly, creating what appeared to be superhuman adaptability. Can you feel how clear intention creates immediate changes in your energetic state? Most martial artists I trained developed this sensitivity only after years of practice, yet it's accessible through this systematic approach in minutes. The key insight that elevated my practice beyond conventional martial arts was recognizing that intention isn't simply a precursor to action. It's a form of action itself. In combat, the gap between intention and movement creates vulnerability. This phase of practice systematically eliminates that gap. When filming the famous mirror scene in Enter the Dragon, I demonstrated this principle by moving with such integration of intention and action that no telegraph was visible. My co-star couldn't predict my movements because there was no separation between my decision to move and the movement itself. Most fighting systems train you to hide your intentions. I discovered something more powerful. Projecting intention so integrated with your structure that response becomes inevitable. During demonstrations against multiple opponents, I would direct intention toward one person and watch others instinctively react, creating openings without physical engagement. You're developing the capacity to create precise physical states through mental intention alone, further dissolving the boundary between what you consider mind and what you consider body. This isn't mystical, it's the practical outcome of integration. Now, while maintaining all four dimensions, structural alignment, breathing coordination, energetic awareness, and projected intention, we'll add the final phase, dynamic expression through movement. This final phase is what I've been working toward my entire life, the complete integration of all elements into unified expression. This is where theory becomes reality, where preparation becomes performance, where practice becomes freedom. We now transition from stillness to movement, maintaining all previous layers of awareness while adding physical expression. This is the moment where most practitioners lose integration. They can maintain unified awareness in stillness, but fragment when movement begins. Begin with the simplest directional movement, a single step forward. Perform this movement with complete integration of all previous phases. Maintain structural alignment, coordinated breathing, energetic awareness, and projected intention throughout the entire movement. Nothing is abandoned as action begins. What I discovered on the set of Fist of Fury changed everything about my approach to combat. During a particularly demanding fight sequence, I maintained complete integration throughout complex choreography for the first time. The result wasn't just faster or more powerful movement. It was movement of an entirely different quality. My opponent described it as fighting water. There was nothing to resist, yet nowhere to escape. Now try a simple weight shift. Transfer your weight from one foot to the other while maintaining all dimensions of integration. You'll likely notice that certain aspects of awareness tend to drop away during even this simple transition. Most commonly, breathing coordination disconnects from movement, or structural awareness diminishes as attention shifts to action. During my private training sessions in 1973, I would practice a single movement, sometimes a basic punch or kick, for hours, not to perfect its external form, but to maintain complete integration throughout its expression. What appeared to observers as obsessive repetition was actually progressive refinement of integration during movement. Gradually increase movement complexity while maintaining integration at all levels. Progress from simple directional movements to more complex expressions, perhaps a basic martial technique you're familiar with. The objective isn't complex choreography, but complete mind-body unity throughout increasingly challenging movements. You'll begin to experience moments where the boundary between intention and action completely dissolves. These aren't mystical experiences. They're glimpses of your natural integrated state without artificial divisions. During filming my final incomplete film, these states became increasingly accessible. What was once rare became my normal operating condition. What distinguishes this phase from ordinary movement practice is the maintenance of multi-layered awareness during action. In conventional training, subtle awareness collapses when movement begins. Attention narrows to external performance. Most fighters I encountered could maintain at most 2 dimensions of awareness during combat, usually structural alignment and intention. True mastery emerges only when all dimensions remain fully active during expression. Before my final demonstrations in Hong Kong, I would systematically activate each layer of integration before beginning movement. Observers noted that something changed in the room before I moved. They could sense the integration of energies even before physical expression began. This wasn't showmanship. It was practical preparation for unified action. The complete integration exercise develops the ability to maintain unity during increasingly dynamic expression. In combat application, this means elimination of the processing gap between perception and response. No delay, no translation, no separation between seeing an opening and exploiting it. My fastest recorded strike, 0.05 of a second from initiation to impact, wasn't the result of muscular development, but of complete integration. As you practice, you'll discover moments where movement seems to originate from nowhere and everywhere simultaneously. Not from your mind commanding your body, not from reflexive response, but from your entire being acting as a unified whole. These moments reveal your true capability when artificial divisions are removed. When integration becomes your normal state, techniques become secondary, tools rather than rules. In my final demonstrations, I no longer thought in terms of specific techniques, but simply allowed appropriate responses to emerge from integration. This is the true meaning of my statement to be like water. It's not philosophical poetry, but the practical outcome of integration practice. Through years of experimentation, failure, and breakthrough, I discovered 3 fundamental keys that determine whether this practice transforms your capabilities or remains merely another exercise. These aren't philosophical principles, but practical insights from my direct experience. I discovered precision matters more than duration. During my recovery from a severe back injury in 1970, I was limited to practicing only minutes per day. This constraint forced me to maximize the quality of each moment. One evening in my Hong Kong apartment, working within these limitations, I achieved a breakthrough that had eluded me during years of extended practice. 5 minutes of absolute precision created more integration than 5 hours of casual attention. Most practitioners make the critical error of valuing quantity over quality, accumulating practice time while never reaching the threshold of precision where transformation occurs. When preparing for crucial fight sequences in my films, I would often reduce practice time by half, while doubling the precision requirement. The results were unmistakable. Not incremental improvement, but quantum shifts in capability. My own progress only came when I abandoned traditional sequencing. Most training approaches separate development phases. First build the foundation, then add energy work, then develop mental discipline. This creates artificial divisions that must later be overcome. The breakthrough that transformed my teaching approach came during intensive work with my most advanced students in 1972. I discovered that simultaneous development across all dimensions, even if initially less refined in each, created faster integration than sequential mastery. Rather than perfect each phase before proceeding, work simultaneously across all dimensions. Begin with crude approximations of the complete practice, then progressively refine each aspect while maintaining the whole. The transformation happens through consistency, not intensity. During preparation for my final demonstrations before returning to Hong Kong, I abandoned the periodic intensive training sessions that had been my standard approach. Instead, I practiced the complete integration exercise twice daily, morning and evening, regardless of circumstances. The consistent reinforcement of integration as my natural state produced results that sporadic intensity never approached. Most seeking mastery make the fundamental error of treating practice as periodic intervention rather than continuous recalibration. Integration isn't something you achieve and possess. It's a dynamic state requiring constant renewal. I offer these keys not as abstract wisdom, but as practical guidance from someone who discovered them through painful trial and error. When a journalist in 1973 asked about my extraordinary abilities, I explained that what appeared extraordinary was simply the natural outcome of integration practice guided by these principles. There was nothing supernatural in my development, only systematic application of precisely targeted practice. Apply these keys to your own practice. Demand absolute precision, even for brief periods rather than extended practice with wavering attention. Work simultaneously across all dimensions rather than mastering them sequentially. Establish consistency that reinforces integration as your natural state rather than an exceptional condition you occasionally achieve. The transformation available through this practice isn't incremental improvement, but fundamental recalibration of how your system operates. The outcome isn't becoming better at what you already do. It's accessing an entirely different mode of function where artificial divisions no longer limit your capabilities. The practice I've shared goes beyond technique. It addresses the fundamental misconception limiting human development, the belief that we exist as divided beings rather than integrated wholes. This artificial division isn't merely a philosophical error. It's a practical constraint that places a ceiling on human capability. In my quietest moments of reflection, often alone in my garden after midnight training sessions, I recognized that this integration practice wasn't ultimately about combat effectiveness or physical performance. Those were simply measurable manifestations of a deeper transformation. The dissolution of perceived boundaries that fragment our experience of ourselves. What I discovered through this practice is that liberation doesn't come from transcending limitations. It comes from recognizing that many limitations exist only in our perception. The boundary between physical and mental isn't an objective reality to be overcome, but a conceptual framework to be discarded. During my final demonstrations in 1973, I experienced moments of complete freedom, not because I had developed extraordinary abilities, but because I had eliminated the artificial divisions that make ordinary capabilities appear limited. The human system is designed for integration. Division is learned, not innate. Watch any child before cultural conditioning fragments their experience. They exist in natural integration until taught that mind and body are separate domains. The practice I've shared isn't creating something new. It's restoring your natural state of unified function. When I speak of being like water, I'm not offering poetic metaphor, but describing the direct experience that emerges from integration practice. Water doesn't decide to flow. Its nature is flowingness itself. When integration becomes your established condition, appropriate action emerges without the intervening processes of decision and implementation. You don't decide and then act. Your integrated being simply responds. This isn't mystical achievement, but practical reality available through systematic development. During my final recorded interviews, I attempted to articulate that what appeared as exceptional ability was actually normal human function without artificial constraints. The practice doesn't make you superhuman. It removes the divisions that make you less than fully human. The integration available through this practice reveals capabilities that seem extraordinary, only because division has become our accepted normal. In my own experience, what others called genius or gift was simply the natural expression of an integrated system functioning without self-imposed limitations. My friend, the practice I've shared isn't ultimately about achievement. It's about liberation from the fundamental misconception that limits human experience. The belief that you exist as fragmented parts rather than an integrated whole. When this misconception dissolves through direct experience, What emerges isn't just better performance, but a different quality of being. The complete concentric integration practice, followed with precision, consistency, and simultaneous development, systematically eliminates the perceived boundary between physical and mental capabilities. What remains isn't a better version of your divided self, but the emergence of your natural integrated being, undivided, responsive, and free.